So you've been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. You're hooked up with a neurologist and they're telling you that you have to take an MS medicine. Why bother? What's the point of taking an MS medicine if you can't cure multiple sclerosis? My name's Boster. I'm an MS neurologist and the founder of the Boster Center for MS. And in this video, I'm going to answer that exact question. Don't turn away, because all of that starts right now. Howdy! Thanks for learning about MS with me, Boster. Many patients pose the question, why bother? What's the point? Why should I take an MS disease-modifying therapy? And it's a fair question, and it deserves a straightforward answer. So in this video, I wanted to share with you my rationale for recommending why people impacted by MS benefit from taking a disease-modifying therapy. Get out a pen and paper and let's jump in. It's my goal to help you live your very best life despite having multiple sclerosis. And in my almost 20 years of experience in helping families impacted by MS, that involves a multi-pronged approach. We absolutely have to pay attention to diet and exercise, no question about it. We absolutely have to pay attention to behavioral and lifestyle things if we want to live our best life. But bluntly, that's inadequate. Just behavioral measures alone, just diet and exercise alone, do not adequately slow down this nasty disease. And the earliest application of the most effective disease-modifying therapy is a key element to winning. Let me try to explain why. MS is a tricky disease because you can actually develop neurological disability from two different ways. You can have something that we call RAW, R-A-W, relapse-associated worsening. In English, you have an MS attack and you don't fully recover. So if I use an example, God forbid you suffer an optic neuritis and you go blind in your eye, and then it comes back part way and you're still legally blind, you can't really see very well with that eye, you have accrued a degree of disability from an incomplete recovery from attack. There's a second way that you can develop disability, which we call PIRA, P-I-R-A, progression independent from relapse activity. And this is insidious. You get worse neurologically, but there's no attack. And bluntly, almost all people impacted by MS can experience both. And lifestyle, exercise, and diet by itself don't do a very good job of slowing those things down. The MS disease-modifying therapies do. And in particular, the newer disease-modifying therapies can do a pretty bang-up job at stopping a lot of that. And so let me break that down for you. I consider 4 goals when using a disease-modifying therapy: stopping MS attacks, stopping new lesions on the brain, slowing brain volume loss, and preventing or slowing down the accrual of disability, neurological disability. So let's take each one of those in turn, starting with relapse reduction or stopping relapses. The MS medicines that are currently FDA approved are all different flavors of anti-inflammatories. Now, I don't mean like an aspirin, but it's an anti-inflammatory mechanism stopping acute inflammation in the brain and spinal cord. The goal here is to prevent new MS attacks from occurring. Now, if you've suffered attacks in the past and you've accrued RAW, you have disability because you didn't fully recover from an optic neuritis, let's say, and you start a disease-modifying therapy, you don't recover what you previously lost. By way of example, if you have 3 children and you start taking an oral birth control pill, you still have 3 children. They don't go away, they're already born. You're taking an oral birth control pill in this example to prevent an unplanned pregnancy. And my joke is, if you want to know why you're taking birth control, go hang out with your 3 kids. Just teasing. But the same logic applies to a disease-modifying therapy. You're taking the disease-modifying therapy because you don't want another attack. We can't give you back what you lost oftentimes. In this respect, the disease-modifying therapy is literally an insurance policy against a future attack. Now, some patients untreated can have an attack very frequently, like an attack every year. Other patients untreated may have an attack every 5 years, but either way, we want to prevent them. The reason is because about 42% of people that have attacks never walk the earth the same. They never fully recover, and they accrue significant neurological disability. And so taking that disease-modifying therapy is one of your best tools to prevent a future attack. That's number 1. Number 2, we want to prevent new brain spots. So let's break this down a little bit. When I say that you have a new spot on your MRI, or I say that you have a lesion on the brain or on the spinal cord. I'm using doctor talk. If I spoke plainly, what I would say is that's brain damage, that's spinal cord damage. Now, if I asked your significant other how much more brain damage are they okay with you accruing, they would say none, zero. They don't want any new brain damage. And yet, when we're looking for spots on the MRI, quite literally, we're looking at new areas of damaged brain tissue, the only untransplantable organ system. When you have new lesions on your MRI or on your spinal cord, to me, that's the exact same issue as when you have an attack. It just didn't manifest clinically, but it's just as concerning. And there's profound, ample, lots and lots of evidence supporting the idea that the more spots you have, particularly in the first 5 or 10 years, the worse long-term outcome you're going to have. Now, one of the ways that I try to explain this is using an analogy. So let's pretend that I blew a hole in that wall. All right, so now there's a giant hole in the wall and they don't patch it. They just leave it there. Now, fast forward 20, 25 years and the building that I'm in gets older and the materials in the building start to wear out. Which wall falls first? That's right, the one with the damage. And in the same fashion, if you have an area of your brain that has been damaged, you have brain damage, as you age, that area is going to wear out faster. And you're going to accrue disability. And so lesions up front lead to disability down the line. And we can prevent that with highly effective disease-modifying therapies. Again, you're buying an insurance policy, not so that you can feel better in the now, but so that you can preserve the neurologic reserve, so that you can preserve brain tissue and brain function, not for today, but for time to come. That's number 2. Hey, real quick before we go on. If you found this video to be useful, do me a kind favor and give it a thumbs up. Also, if you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so. Those 2 actions teach the YouTube algorithm that you like this content and help push it out so more families impacted by MS can benefit. Thank you. Number 3 has to deal with brain volume, the size of your brain. So after the age of 18, all brains shrink a little bit every year on purpose. In the same way that as we get older, we get a little bit shorter. And as we get older, our skin gets a little thinner. As we get older, our brains shrink a little bit each year, about 0.2% a year on average. In the setting of untreated MS, however, brains shrink much faster, upwards of 10 times faster in some extreme cases. And brain shrinkage, the doctor term is atrophy, brain shrinkage is one of the very tightest correlates to long-term disability and cognitive impairment. And so we want to do something to slow down brain volume loss. Now, there are behavioral things like not smoking, like treating cardiovascular risk factors. I believe supplementing vitamin D, exercise. Those are things that can help slow brain volume loss, but it's not adequate. Many of the newer disease-modifying therapies can quite literally slow down the rates of brain volume loss. Some of them are remarkable, and they can allow the brain of someone with MS to shrink at the same rate as the general population. And I want that for you. I want to preserve the neurologic reserve. That's number 3. Number 4 has to do with slowing neurological progression of disability, so slowly getting worse over time. The natural history of a disease is a doctor's way of saying, hey, if I don't do anything, what do I expect to have happen? And the natural history of MS is that the human being progresses in neurological disability as they age, which is really nasty stuff. We want to slow that down to the very best of our ability. And in the best case scenarios, we want to halt it completely. Now, transparently, the current disease-modifying therapies that are available, I make this video in 2023, can't adequately stop that in its tracks. But it can slow it down, and that's worthwhile. I've had patients say, well, if I'm going to progress anyways, what's the point? Well, I can slow the progression of disability. And whereas I'm not proud of that, I would like to be able to stop it completely, it's still very, very important so that you can live your best life despite having this disease. If we take you and clone you, now we'd have to get permission from your family, and they may say no, but just humor me. We clone you, so there's 2 copies of you. And we give one of you a disease-modifying therapy and a hug, and the other one just gets a hug. And then we come back 5 years later. What we will find is The version of you that got just a hug has accrued more neurological disability. They have more problems with thinking, with bowel and bladder, with walking, etc., compared to the version of you that got a disease-modifying therapy and a hug. And I think that's very, very worthwhile. Are MS disease-modifying therapies magical? No, absolutely not. Do we need to do better? Yes, we do. But are they worthwhile? Yes, very much so. The future is very, very bright. At the Boster Center for MS, we're participating in multiple research studies in hopes of finding MS disease-modifying therapies that can better control smoldering MS, the slow burn in the background leading to neurological disability. At present, there's a lot that these medicines can do, and I really want you to take the most effective disease-modifying therapy that you're comfortable taking. In the future, when we have better drugs, we'll offer them to you, but I want you to live your very best life now. Thanks for learning about MS with me, Aaron Boster, and if you want to up your game, click the video that's on your screen right now. And until my next Monday morning video or my next live stream, or even better yet, the next time I see you at the Boster Center for MS, this is Aaron Boster saying be safe and take care.